Your tax returns just came back and you are not financially responsible at all. Should I put it into savings? No, I'm gonna buy a thermal optic and I've gotta do it before my wife sees exactly how much money we got back as a family.
But you are wise enough to actually do a little bit of research before you go spend that money. And as you're doing the research, you figure out there's no such thing as a budget thermal. I mean, there is, but it really just means I'm still spending thousands of dollars for a less expensive version that does less for me than what the military is actually issued.
Actually, you have purchased a thermal optic in the past, whether you know it or not, with your tax dollars for the US military and thus the Taliban.
Which really means that it's also going to Pakistan and China and all the other people that hate us. Which, funny story, means it's also probably coming across through the southern border. So they're at least getting close to home, and if you play your cards right, you might be able to get your hands on it with the secret ingredient, if you know what I'm saying.
The things that keep me up at night, but that is not what the video is about. Josh, tell them what the video is actually about.
All right, so we're gonna be going over 4 popular thermal optics that are under that $5,000 price point, but we're gonna be asking key questions that you should be asking yourself before you go select a thermal optic like one of these. And from there, you'll be able to select what really is the perfect purchase for you based on your own needs. And they may not be the same for every single person.
The first one is the Holosun DRS Thermal, or TH. It comes in at about $1,900. We also have the FAH25, which comes in at $4,000. Then we have the NiteHog Viper35, which I actually have set up with this Tango 6T here on this agency arms rifle that I've been shooting all day. It comes in at $2,800, so definitely closer to that lower budget option. And then finally, we're gonna go back to the RH25 from iRay, which is a $4,000 optic if you get the version 1. The version 2 is $5,000.
All right, the first and probably most important question that you need to ask yourself is, what do I expect this thermal device to do for me? And how do I see myself using it? So for example, let's say you get a device that is designated for a handheld. Can it also be a clip-on option? If you have a clip-on option, does it have the ability to toggle offset, kind of like a G33? So now you can have your day optic, flip that thing over, and now you have a thermal optic. Or maybe you want something that is fused. I want a standalone optic that also has thermal built into the optic itself. Or maybe you want to have that scanning capability where it's not on my gun, but I'd really like to have it helmet mounted so my hands are actually free. You need to ask yourself, what do I see myself doing with this device? And then you can hammer down on what tool will be best applicable to your personal use case.
Okay, so handheld thermal optics. This is, in my opinion, the greatest ability that a thermal optic can give you, because just like with flashlights, I don't want my primary flashlight to be the one that's on my handgun. I want it to be the one that's just in my pocket. It's free, it's handheld, because I would like to be able to identify something without pointing a gun at it. Same thing is true for thermal. I would like to be able to throw this in a pocket or a backpack or whatever if I'm out in the woods and be able to pull it up and just scan and look for heat signatures, whether it's, you're defending your property or you're scanning for predators, whatever it is. I just need this ability, right? I don't need it attached to a gun all the time. So as far as handheld ability goes, the Holosun actually doesn't give you that ability, even though it's the cheapest one in the price range, and you can find super cheap thermal optics that are handheld only. The Holosun just doesn't do that. It is attached to a gun. Sure, you could, take it off, but that's just a huge waste of time and just kind of dumb, in my opinion. The FAH25, same story. Taking that thing off and holding it up, it doesn't work well. But the Viper 35 is perfect for that. The RH25, perfect for that. And both of those two options are wildly different in terms of their price points. You're going from $2,800 up to $5,000. The other reason why having a handheld is so valuable is also when you're moving. If you have a thermal optic that's dedicated to your gun and that's all you have, then you're having to stop and scan pretty regularly. Whereas if you're just walking around, you can be on the move, checking stuff anytime you want. It's significantly easier. It's kind of like the way to go. Having a handheld unit, at least for me, I don't know about for you, is kind of a requirement. Big thanks to 100 Concepts. We've been using their products for years, and they are sponsors of this channel that make content like this for you guys free every single week. And here's some of the cool stuff that they make. They might make scope caps and white light caps so that you don't accidentally, ND your white light and give away your position to all the UN soldiers filing in on your position. This one right here I have on this Tango 6T, and it's pretty rad. It's also got an anti-reflective device on it with a full cap, also one for the rear. They make make a lot of really cool products like this.
Now, if you are investing into some budget thermal, it is still a horrible option for navigation. If you spend tons of money on thermal, it gets a little bit better, but nods are still king when it comes to walking around in the dark. And when it comes to night vision, our go-to is Steel Industries, a big sponsor of the channel. A huge shout out to them. If you guys are looking for night vision accessories or even mounts to go onto your rifle so you can shoot passively through, go check out Steel Industries. We do have a discount. Link is in the description. With that, let's get back to the video.
So this leads directly to the next category that you have to figure out whether you need or not, which is the ability to clip on your thermal optic to your rifle in front of a scope in order to shoot. To me, that is a no-brainer. I absolutely want that functionality. I want to be able to use it as a handheld and then throw it on my gun and immediately take shots. Now, there are plenty of options on the market for thermals that are handheld only. And while I think that is extremely valuable, I would not dump a lot of money into that technology if it didn't also have the capability of being clipped onto my gun. Now, in that regard, I've been super impressed with this NiteHog Viper35. I know it's a weird name, but the cool part about this optic is also that it is German made.
3 Gläser.
So for all of you who are wanting to get away from Chinese optics, well, there's Europeans making quality thermal at a budget-y price point. Now, the ability to clip it on obviously increases the cost from it just being purely a handheld, but also you have to have a scope in order for it to clip onto, right? So that's another cost. So while this unit is only $2,800, once you add in the cost of this Tango 6T, you can go with a cheaper optic. Like, that's not a big deal, but the cost of the scope is also factored in there as well. So already you're kind of up to like a $3.5 to $4, maybe even more, $4,000 price range for your entire optic setup. Now the RH25 obviously does this as well. You can use it as a handheld. You can also clip it onto your gun in front of your scope. We've done videos on this and how well it performs. But again, you're talking about $5,000, $4,000 if you find an old one.
Now, maybe you don't want to have a handheld and a clip-on combination. You don't want to have to go buy an LPVO just to make all that happen either. And you want to have one purchase that is a fused thermal option, something like the HoloSun or this iRay, where everything is already built in. Now, there's some pretty serious pros and cons to this. On one hand, like Drew was talking about with a handheld, my thermal capabilities are planted on this gun, and for me to remove this means I'm removing my sighting system. And now I would have to re-zero everything if this does come off. So you really have to be dedicated to this platform if that's what it is that you're really gonna be doing. Next, if you are going this route, there's some important factors that you need to consider. So for example, on the HoloSun, there is a plastic cap that can be flipped up and down. And when you have that, it actually allows you to be using the thermal eye that is built into the optic during the daytime. Now, we don't have one on this iRay, the FAH25, and that's a serious downside specifically for this optic. For me to be able to use the thermal that is built in down below, I have to put my hand or maybe even like a piece of tape over this glass so that I'm not getting all this other light passing through my optic and washing out the thermal capabilities. So there's just a few questions and things to pay attention to if you are actually getting a built-in fused thermal optic. The other upside though is, man, it's really compact. It is short. If you're running it on like a 10-3 or a 300 blackout, you don't have this long LPVO to clip-on combination. It is a really small package, and if that's your goal, that is pretty nice. Now, one more big upside if you are running a fused and day optic combination is you have everything inside of the same field of view really all at the same time. So with that HoloSun, you just fold down your plastic visor. With this, you either take your hand off or peel that tape off, and you're still shooting with the same red dot that was already zeroed with the same image that you'd be seeing with thermal or just through your piece of glass.
Now, if you have a clip-on thermal, there are ways to utilize both the thermal and still have access to vis through your normal optic, and that is with flip-to-side mounts. The problem is there aren't too many good flip-to-side mount options on the market, and the ones that are there are very expensive and very hard to get. So for example, the RH25, you could get one of the Wilcox Skeet IR flip-to-side mounts. They're like $500. They probably only make like 50 of them a year because you can never find them anywhere. I'm pretty sure Brindle and Bullets is out there buying all of them up, and for that, I hate him, but I also love him. But that mount is actually made specifically for the Skeet IR, so it doesn't naturally fit with the RH25, so you have to go out and buy another part from HRF Concepts in order to get it to fit correctly. So already you're spending 600 bucks just on a mount to flip the thing to the side. This NiteHog, it actually came with an additional cost, came with its own flip to side mount. It's okay. It's a little wobbly. It's not perfect. So flip to side with clip-ons is an option. It's just an additional cost and kind of at the detriment of a little bit of reliability and accuracy. Now, one thing you may want your thermal optic to have the ability to do is to be its own dedicated optic. So for example, this NiteHog 35, again, comes in at the $2,800 price range. It's a little bit cheaper, but you don't get a reticle inside of it. So in other words, you can't put this on the gun and shoot through it. It has to be attached to some other optic, which again increases the overall optic price package, right? The RH25 on the other hand, $4,000 to $5,000, you can put that directly on your rifle with no other optic and shoot with it accurately at distance. Now, there is no shortage of thermal optics on the market that are their own standalone units. They are their own scope that you can shoot through. You start to really drop some coin if you want the really nice ones. They get to be very, very expensive. There are some good budget options, but this is just one of those things that you need to ask yourself, do I want this to stand alone? Or am I okay with just a clip-on device that I can use in a variety of fashions?
And to bring it all the way back around to really just an observation mode would be a helmet mounted. Now, one of the upsides to helmet mounted is often you can connect it next to a PVS-14, which means you would then be able to observe really well, free up your hands while you're walking around, holding your gun or whatever else you may be doing. Then if you have a laser or at least an optic tall enough to shoot through, with that PVS-14, and I know we're stacking up on price here, but with that, you can observe and shoot through that whole combination.
Okay, so next we need to talk about the performance of these things because they can vary wildly. And when, you know, hundreds of coyotes are closing in on your position or UN forces finally march on US soil, you need to know that your optic is going to perform well.
Yeah, so the first thing that we need to talk about is the image clarity. And we're not really going to get into the specifics as far as like a 640 core versus a 320. We're talking about what our human eye has actually perceived. And the biggest thing that you need to understand is when you add magnification, you're still just magnifying a screen, the pixels, what it is actually able to portray to you. So the RH25, when it is placed in front of an LPVO, at least as far as we can tell, really only performs at about 4 or 5 times magnification. Anything higher than that, and you are just zooming in and blowing up those pixels to a point where you can't make out the detail that you would like to be seeing.
So Josh and I played a little game where we ranked each one of these optics in terms of which one do we think has the best image quality. Just our perception, not talking about the specs or anything, and the RH25 was obviously on top. It should be, with as expensive as it is. The second option was actually this NiteHog, which is actually pretty good. Even at distance, not as good, but pretty darn close. And then you get to like your fused units. So third place would be the Holosun, which looked great under 3x magnification. Anything more, it's not going to be great because again, you're just zooming up on the same set of pixels. And then coming in last is of course the FAH25. Now this is a great opportunity to talk about why price matters and why image quality matters. Typically, the more you spend, the better your image quality is going to be, but not all the time. In fact, if you take a look at the difference between the Holosun and the FAH25, one is half the price of the other and has better image clarity, especially under magnification. So it's another great reason why you should consume as much YouTube content of different people showing their different thermal optics as possible. There's no one person who has tested every single thermal out there, and if they are, they're hiding. They're not on YouTube, they're not telling us. So don't just watch our thermal content, watch everyone's thermal content to make the best decision possible. So once again, we rank these optics in terms of just how many settings and how many bells and whistles come packaged inside the optic. It comes as no surprise that RH25 is #1 in terms of most options. You have the biggest choice of color palette from white hot to black hot to red hot to predator vision. The Holosun optic, which is the complete opposite end of the spectrum in terms of price, came in #2. The FAH25 came in as #3, and the NiteHog came in dead last. But I'll say this, The modes that it has, which is white hot, black hot, and there is a red hot mode, it's just harder to switch between. You can pretty much just toggle between two, like that awesome button on your remote control for the TV from whenever you were in high school or middle school and you had to change the channel real fast.
What are you even saying?
So all these settings and all these menu options and all these like really cool bells and whistles that come packaged in some of these optics, it really leads to a great opportunity to talk about general ease of use.
Inside of the ease of use category, we also have to talk about one of the things that I hate the most when it comes to thermal optics, and that is zeroing. So once you get these things mounted up and you're actually shooting with them, there are different styles of zeroing these things. Sometimes you're taking the reticle inside of the thermal and you're shooting through that. Sometimes you're collimating and you're moving the image around inside of the thermal to actually line up with your LPVO to mirror the same image that you would be seeing through your standard daytime optic. And we have to rank these between what is the best as far as zeroing and what is the worst. Drew, you want to take it away?
I'm over here now, demonstrating how to correctly, bring it down, shoulder level on the eyes, showing how to correctly demonstrate how to stand on camera and still keep it, personal.
Okay.
So we ranked all of these once again, in terms of ease of use. We factored in the zeroing, and the Holosun, which is one of the cheaper options, in fact, the cheapest option out of all of this, was far and away the easiest thing to zero and use in general. Followed shortly by the NiteHog because of its lack of features is actually way easier to use. Going to the RH25 in position 3, phenomenal optic, but because of all the settings, you really have to get into it to figure out how to use it really well. And then the FAH25 was the most painful thing to get zeroed that I've ever seen, and it makes no sense.
You would think it would be fairly straightforward because, hey, it's just a red dot. Well, first of all, these are your turrets to change your elevation and windage, and you'll notice that one of these turrets says left and up. Well, you better believe it is left and up. The other turret is down, just down. So here's what I did is I started shooting and I had rounds landing to the right. Well, typically we would be moving our turrets to the left. It does the exact opposite. If you're hitting right, you need to move the reticle right. But keep in mind, it would then be going right and down. So that was issue number one. Issue number two is as you're moving these turrets, there's no clicky tactile kind of thing like you have on an EOTech or an Aimpoint. They're just soft and mushy little circles. So as you're moving these around with no dials, no marking points, you're like, I guess I'll go a half a revolution, maybe a 16th of a revolution. And because there's nothing actually holding these in place, let me see if I can, oh yeah, I can absolutely move these just with my fingers. No flathead screw needed or anything like that. So as far as zeroing and accuracy goes, wouldn't trust this. At least as far as taking a shot on a coyote past 50 yards, probably wouldn't trust it. Let's change some levels here and let's talk about the weight of some of these things. Can't remember a single one of them. Drew, do you know?
Yeah, I know. Like, he's just trying to one-up me being up there and everything. So in first place, the lightest one comes in at 12.7 ounces, the RH25, the most expensive option. Second, gosh dang it. Second place is 1.3 pounds, the Holosun, all in one unit. And the next two, it's a tie. The NiteHog and the FAH25 both come in at 2.9 pounds. Now we factored in the magnifier for the FAH25 and the scope for the NiteHog. So obviously, depending on which scope you're running, that's going to vary. But far and away, the RH25 is the lightest one. And why does weight matter, Josh?
Weight matters a whole ton. All right, we're gonna be talking about battery life to wrap things up, and you'll probably be surprised to know that these do not last nearly as long as you would hope. You're gonna be swapping batteries probably every day. Let's get specifics on the battery life. Tell them, Pedro.
Okay, so according to my calculations, the winner here is Holosun at 10 hours using the thermal. And that's kind of like the kicker here is when the thermal is in use, this is how much runtime you can expect out of it. As you add in features, like as you start recording, if it has onboard recording, your battery life is gonna go down. The NiteHog, with the fewest features of all of them, comes in at 5 hours, and then both the FAH25 and the RH25 come in at about 4 hours of use. Now I can tell you this, using these things in the cold, that's gonna drop off even more. I know we've had a fresh battery in an RH25 go out in about an hour and a half before, if not even less.
Yep.
So your time is going to vary, but that is something you should definitely check out because that factors into the cost. If you're buying some of these things, if you're buying a thermal optic, get like 4 batteries, seriously. Because if you ever are out in the field, if you ever actually have to employ this for like a serious use or even non-serious use, you're just out hunting coyotes or predators or something like that, being able to swap batteries regardless of the condition, so if it's cold, you have plenty of batteries to last you through the night, is a really, really big deal.
Now to wrap all this up, we can't tell you what optic is going to be perfect for you, and it may even be an optic that we haven't even really highlighted here in this video or any of our other content. But if you're able to ask the right questions, starting with what does this specific optic do for me, or even more valuable, what am I looking for out of a thermal tool? If you can hammer down and clearly state, this is what I would like that thermal optic to do for me, you're gonna be way ahead of the curve. And then you're gonna be able to ask further questions like the battery life. Can it be mounted in front of an optic? How does it do when it's magnified? And then you'll be able to narrow down to, I think this is probably going to be the best purchase for me.
Now, I can already see in the comment section people being like, oh, you call that budget? Listen, most of us own vehicles. There is not a single vehicle on the market that is a budget vehicle because they are all expensive. Even a $1,000 clunker that barely runs, which you can't even hardly get a running car these days for $1,000, it's still $1,000, man. So in terms of thermal, nothing is affordable. There's just some things that cost less than others. With that being said, don't just expect that the most expensive thing that you can afford is going to be the right thing for you. You could end up spending way more money than you need to for something that you only need 2 of the 50 things it offers you. So be wise, answer these questions for yourself, watch a ton of different content creators and what they have to say about different thermal optics, because once again, no one channel, no one person, no one end user is going to have all the answers. You should be listening and watching a lot of different people to make the best decision.
Now guys, if you appreciate content like this, we have to give a special shout out to Patreon because they keep us going every single week. They also have first access to us. We get a lot of DMs and emails, but we always get back to Patreon as fast as possible. And they get content like this ahead of time. So they get to be able to review our content, drop in comments just like you would on YouTube, but minus the ads as well. So thank you to Patreon. If you're also wanting to support us and you want to pick up some merch like hats, coffee cups, bunch of different things, you can head over to our website and you can buy products there too. Finally, we have battery life. Now,
Hold up. Start walking for a full second before you do it. Stop. We're gonna run out of space.
1001. All right, we're gonna be talking about battery life. Now, the surprising thing is these do not last nearly as long as you might expect.
All right, I can't. It's too shaky.